May 19th, 1983, Springfield, Oregon. A red Nissan Pulsar pulls up to the ER entrance at McKenzie-Willamette Hospital. Inside the car are 3 children, bleeding, barely breathing. And behind the wheel, their mother, Diane Downs. She tells police she was carjacked, that a stranger stepped out from the trees and opened fire, that she fought him off, that she drove her children to safety. She cries on camera, tells reporters she's a survivor, a mother desperate for justice. But the truth is Diane who pulled the trigger 3 times, point blank, in the dark, while her children begged her to stop. This is the story of a mother who turned her fantasy into a crime scene and blamed everyone but herself for what came next. I'm Sidney Smith, and this is Murderous Podcast. And this week's Murderous, episode 82, Diane Downs. Before the news vans, before the hospital hallway, before the words, "My children have been shot," Diane Downs was just a little girl. Blonde hair, big eyes, living in a Baptist home in Phoenix, Arizona. And like a lot of kids growing up behind tight curtains and tighter rules, Diane learned something early. In her house, silence was survival. Her father, Wes Fredrickson, was the kind of man who believed obedience came before affection. He worked hard. He went to church. He had a reputation in the community as a strict, decent man. But Diane would later claim that behind closed doors, Wes was something else entirely. Controlling, manipulative, and abusive. She accused him of sexually abusing her as a child. No charges were ever filed, though. He denied it. Her mother denied it. The truth to this day is murky. But here's what we do know. Whether it happened or not, Diane carried that belief into adulthood like a script. She would return to it again and again. Anytime her behavior needed justifying, it became part of her identity, part of her story. And maybe that's what's more terrifying. Not knowing whether the monster came from inside her house or from inside her mind. In school, Diane was odd. Not enough to stand out in the yearbook, just enough to make people uncomfortable. She didn't have many friends. She was the kind of kid who smiled when everyone else was crying. She'd lie about the smallest things. Claim she had a secret boyfriend from another school. Well, all of us had at least one friend who did that in school, right? She'd say her family was rich, say they were moving to Europe. She was always trying to control the story, trying to center it herself. Now, take a break from this real quick. I remember having a friend who was much the same in high school, and I'm not going to say his name, but he would always come to school with these different claims of these different things. You know, if everyone had a group of friends, you all had one. I'm talking about guys especially. You always had the one guy who would always pretend he had the girlfriend, but she went to a different school. Or I met this girl and these things happened, even though anytime he met a girl and you all were together, things didn't quite seem to play out the way they did when none of us were around. Like his favorite thing would be to come to school on Monday and tell us he met a girl and give you these scenes that were obviously on the movie he watched the night before, that type of thing. We were on the beach and the waves crashed against our body. And we just remember being kids and just joking and teasing with him about these different things. So it's not that unusual to hear of a kid who would make up things. But attention wasn't a desire. It was a need for her. One of her old classmates said years later, Diane always had some dramatic thing happening, but nothing ever quite made sense. You got the feeling it wasn't about what happened. It was about how much you looked at her while she said it. And when puberty hit, Diane transformed. She started dressing older, heavier makeup, her hair bleached and styled like a beauty queen. She started going by Diane, dropping her given name Elizabeth, like it was a skin she didn't need anymore. She flirted with boys, but there was no warmth to it. It was performative, transactional. If they gave her attention, she'd glow. If they ignored her, she'd spiral. By high school, the behavior had escalated. She'd fake illness to get out of class, claim her boyfriend hit her, pretend to faint just to get the school nurse to hold her hand. But when the nurse looked away, the smile would slip back in. And that's the thing. This wasn't a girl struggling with depression. This wasn't a girl who couldn't connect. This was a girl who only knew how to connect when she was the center of something. Drama, chaos, desperation, whatever got the spotlight. Her family, tight-lipped and image conscious, pretended to not notice, which is always dangerous. What went on behind the walls stayed behind the walls, which is exactly how a lot of us were raised, myself included. My mother always had the rule, what happens in here stays in here. Wes was strict. Willadine, her mother, was silent. And Diane learned that affection was conditional. But attention could be manipulated. By graduation, Diane was already rewriting her own mythology. She was going to be someone important, someone noticed, someone needed. She was going to fall in love, have beautiful children, and be the woman everyone envied. But not because she wanted to raise a family. Not because she wanted to give love. She wanted the performance, the image. And when you build your entire identity around how you look from the outside, you don't really care what happens on the inside. After high school, Diane Fredrickson did what girls in small towns with strict parents and no real plan often do. She married the first guy who looked at her long enough. His name was Steve Downs. They'd known each other since high school. He was quiet, dependable, not exactly exciting, but that didn't matter to Diane. She was in it for the excitement. Not yet. She wasn't in it for the excitement. Not yet. She was in it for the look of the thing. She got pregnant at 18. They got married. They moved into a modest apartment. And for a moment, just a moment, Diane was finally playing the part she'd always wanted. The young wife, the struggling new mom, the center of her own soap opera. But reality doesn't play along for long, and we all know that. Diane didn't take to motherhood, not the way people expected her to. She complained about the noise, the mess, the way the baby clung to her. Steve tried to help, but Diane didn't want help. She wanted out. Friends said she seemed bored, like the kids were a chore, like the marriage was a role she'd already lost interest in. She would say things like, I don't know why people act like being a mom is such a big deal. It's not hard. It's just annoying. I didn't ask for this, which should have been a red flag for so many people. I know hindsight is always 2020, folks. I know it always is. But sometimes the red flag is so large, I don't know how you just miss it. Steve, for all of his quiet demeanor, was trying. He worked full time, paid the bills, he changed diapers, he cooked, he was soft-spoken but grounded. And despite the arguments, despite the stress, he loved those kids. Everyone around them could see it. But loving the kids wasn't enough to keep the marriage afloat. Diane filed for divorce in 1980. She took the children, Christy, Cheryl, and Danny, and moved out on her own. And for a while, it looked like she was doing okay. She got a job, found a routine, even played the part of the overworked single mom, that same old performative charm. To outsiders, Diane was a picture of determination. Rough edges, sure, but she showed up. She made dinner. She tucked the kids in at night. But if you zoomed in just a little closer, you'd see the cracks starting to form. Cheryl, the middle child, was afraid of her mother. She'd confide in an extended family in whispers. She didn't want to get in trouble, but she didn't feel safe. Neighbors noticed Diane losing her temper, snapping at the kids in grocery stores, yanking their arms in parking lots. One neighbor said she once heard Diane yell, "You're ruining my life," at her 7-year-old. Danny, the youngest, was quiet, withdrawn. He clung to his older sisters. Christy, the oldest, was protective, too protective. Like a child who already knew that her mother's moods could switch without warning. And it was up to her to keep things calm. Now, I've talked to people and I have friends who, I'm not going to say they grew up in a situation where their mother did the things that Diane did to the extent that she did. But we've had conversations where they grew up in a household where they knew they had to really take on the weight of keeping the mood of the household level, keep it even keel for whatever reason. And it is a weird space to be in because they grow up, you know, I've seen it from the outside looking in, where they grow up being able to handle any room that they go in because they know the importance of it. So it was weird to grow up as a child and have that stress on you. And we all know, we all talk about it. You don't need to go lay on someone's couch to know it, that we all tend to carry things with us from childhood into teen years, into adulthood. And sometimes it dictates who you are and how you react to things, and you don't even realize it until you do realize it. Steve saw it too. He'd call to try to check in, offer help. So even though they're not together, he's still trying to be of a help to her. But Diane didn't want help. She wanted freedom. She wanted to be seen. And that's when she made a new plan. One that seemed noble on the surface, but underneath had all the familiar Diane markers. Attention, performance, applause. She applied to become a surrogate mother. Twice, in fact. And both times, somehow, she passed the psychological evaluations. She told friends she loved being pregnant, loved the way people treated her, loved the glow, the bump, the compliments. but she showed no attachment to the child itself, no warmth, no grief when the baby was adopted out, no sense of loss. To Diane, pregnancy wasn't about creating life. It was about creating a role, a narrative where she was the strong, selfless woman giving another family a miracle. And people believed her because that's what Diane was good at, playing a part just long enough for the curtain call. But not everyone bought the act. One of her coworkers noticed that Diane never talked about her own kids with the same affection she showed the surrogate pregnancy. She once overheard Diane say, "That baby wasn't mine. I just wanted to be pregnant," and then laughed. Another friend said Diane confided that she wished her kids would just disappear, that she was tired of being tied down, that she wanted a fresh start. She just wanted to start fresh again. She didn't say it in anger. She said it like a dream, a wish. And I guess if you're that friend, if you hear it, and if that's how she said it, maybe you can look past it because it wasn't said with anger. So you don't read it as, maybe I should be on the lookout. Maybe I should warn someone. And the thing about Diane is she didn't believe in letting go of a dream. She believed in making it happen. Because Diane Downs didn't just want attention. She wanted a new life. One without mess, without noise. One where she was finally the main character without a supporting cast. And she thought she found it in a man at work. Someone who made her feel seen again, desired, important, special. A man who, unfortunately for the children, wanted nothing to do with kids. Next, the fantasy, the obsession, the plan. By early 1983, Diane was working as a postal carrier in Springfield, Oregon. Not glamorous, not exciting, but to Diane, the uniform meant something. It meant structure, respect, authority. It meant people noticing her. And one person did notice her, at least for a while. His name was Robert Knickerbocker, but everyone called him Nick. He was older, handsome, married, worked in the same building. And for Diane, he might as well have walked out of a romance novel. From the moment she met him, she was hooked. But this wasn't love. Not the kind that builds slowly, like bricks in a wall. This was infatuation, instant, all-consuming, the kind of obsession that drowns everything else. The two of them had a short sexual relationship, mostly physical. No flowers, no dates, just tension, lust, flirtation at work, stolen moments after hours. To Nick, it was a fling, a distraction. But to Diane, it was destiny. She started telling friends they were in love, that he would leave his wife for her, that he'd be moving in any day now. But Nick was clear. He was not leaving his wife. And more importantly, he didn't want any kids. Not just now, ever. This was a problem for Diane because she didn't just have kids. She had 3. One of them with special needs. one who was afraid of her, and one who acted like the parent in the house. Nick wasn't shy about it either. He told her straight, "You're fun, but I don't want your kids in my life." Most people would take the hint, maybe cry, maybe get angry, maybe walk away. But Diane, she got inspired. She started writing about him, long diary entries, love letters, pages and pages of fantasies. She described their wedding, their new home, their future. All of it carefully imagined, except for one missing detail: the kids. They were gone in every version of these fantasies. She started telling coworkers and friends that the kids were getting in the way, that they were ruining everything, that Nick was the one, but he just couldn't handle the baggage. One coworker remembered her saying casually, "If only they weren't around, he'd love me." And then laughing like it was a joke, except no one else was laughing. It wasn't long after that Diane started visiting a local shooting range. She didn't tell many people. She went alone, paid in cash. She practiced with a .22 caliber handgun, the same kind of weapon that would later be used on her children. One range employee would later testify that Diane was surprisingly focused, quiet, controlled, practicing one-handed shots, reloading quickly. Nobody asked questions. One friend noticed a gun in her car glove box and asked why she had it. Diane shrugged and said, "A girl's got to protect herself, right?" And then changed the subject. The people around her saw signs, small ones, scattered. The way she talked about Nick, like they were married. The way she talked about her kids, like they were her chores. The gun in the car, the jokes that weren't really jokes. But no one put it all together. I want to let these people off the hook, because no one, even as often as we've seen it in the news, even as many stories as you'll hear me do on this podcast, no one ever has the initial thought that this woman, this man, this person could ever do anything to their own kids. Because hell, you think I have kids, and I couldn't imagine any harm coming to them by way of me. So no one put all of those different things together. Not until it was too late. And even then, even in the days before she'd do, Diane was still writing in her journal like it was a script. One entry read, "Nick is the love of my life. He just needs time. I'll fix things. I'll fix everything." And the next day, Diane Downs loaded her kids into the car and they went for a drive. She told them it was just a scenic route, a detour. But Diane wasn't looking for scenery. She was looking for a moment. And she knew exactly where to find it. Coming up, the lie, the shooting, the night she made herself the victim after trying to erase her own children. May 19th, 1983. A warm spring night in Springfield, Oregon. Diane Downs loads her 3 children into her red Nissan Pulsar just before 9 p.m. No car seats, no clear destination. Just a night drive, she says. A way to let the kids wind down, look at the stars, enjoy a snack. But that wasn't the real reason. Diane had told her friends that day that she felt off, that she was tired of being everything to everyone. She hadn't seen Nick in days. He wasn't returning her calls. At the post office, she was still wearing her uniform after hours, lingering at certain houses, saying hello to customers she didn't deliver to anymore. It's a good job, she told a coworker once. People respect you. They wave. They smile. I like that. But lately, the job hasn't been enough. The attention was slipping. The fantasy was crumbling. And the kids, their nose, their mess, their neediness, they were the thing that kept getting in the way. She said as much in her diary. I could have the life I want. Nick just needs time. If the kids were out of the picture, he'd come around. One friend asked her, seriously, why not just let Steve take them? Meaning the kids. Her ex-husband had even offered more than once. Steve loved those kids. He didn't live nearby anymore, but he'd drive back. He'd make it work. But Diane refused. They're mine. I'm the mom, she snapped. I'm not giving them up like some deadbeat. I've done everything. I'm the one who stayed. It's just weird how she looks at all of these the different ways she sees the world. But staying wasn't the same as loving, and love was never Diane's goal. Control was. Let me read that again, because I wish more people in relationships, in divorce proceedings, in these split families, I wish more people could just understand this line. But staying wasn't the same as loving. At 10:48 p.m., Diane pulls into the emergency bay at McKenzie Willamette Hospital. She jumps out of the car screaming. Her arm is bleeding. The children are in the back seat. Cheryl, age 7, is already dead. Danny, age 3, is paralyzed from the chest down. Christy, age 8, is clinging to life, gasping, eyes open but fading. And Diane's been shot too. A superficial gunshot wound to her left forearm. She tells hospital staff she was carjacked on Old Mohawk Road, that a bushy-haired stranger stepped out of the trees, demanded her car, and opened fire. She tells the story breathlessly, hands flailing, her voice loud and broken. But the nurses notice something. And it's not just the injury. It's her tone. It's the lack of panic. The way she's talking about her kids, not to them. I can't believe this happened to me, she says. They were just sitting there, being so cute. I didn't deserve this. She keeps asking about the media. Are they coming? Will I have to do a press conference? One nurse later testified she didn't ask once, not once, if the kids were going to make it. Doctors work on Christy and Danny. Cheryl is gone. And Diane? Well, Diane is flirting with the paramedic. Flirting. She's asking if he's single. She's smiling, playing the role of scared but strong single mom. And it might have worked if she hadn't made one mistake. She drove too slowly. Investigators noticed that the distance from Old Mohawk Road to the hospital should have taken 10 minutes, maybe 12 if she was shaken up. It took Diane over 25. They found blood in the car, drying, not fresh. They found no sign of a struggle where she claimed the carjacking happened. And the ballistics didn't lie. The bullets were .22 caliber, fired at close range from inside the car, not outside. But the real turn came days later when Christy, 8 years old, still fighting to survive, regained her ability to speak. The first thing she said was, "My mom did it." She'd been awake. She'd seen the whole thing. She just hadn't had the strength to say it. Until now. That was the moment the lie fell apart. Not when the gun was found. Not when the car was examined. Not when Diane changed her story. Again. It was when her daughter, the one who still had a bullet in her chest, said the words no one wanted to believe. "My mom shot us." By the time Diane Downs stood trial for the murder of her daughter Cheryl and the attempted murder of Christy and Danny, the public already knew her name. She had been on the local news. She had been interviewed by reporters, photographed outside the hospital, offering tearful pleas for answers. "All I want is for my kids to come home, for this man to be caught. That's all I care about." But the tears never looked quite right. They came without warning, and they stopped just as quickly. There were tremors in her voice, no grief in her body. What there was control. Again, performance. A woman more worried about how she looked than what she'd lost. Prosecutors weren't fooled. Neither were the detectives. And by late October 1983, just 5 months after the shooting, Diane Downs was arrested and charged. She was indicted. 1 count of murder for Cheryl. 2 counts of attempted murder for Christy and Danny. 2 counts of first-degree assault. But the headlines weren't just about the charges. Because when she walked into court, Diane Downs was pregnant. That's right. She got pregnant. Again, while out on bail, awaiting trial. She seduced a man she barely knew, a coworker, someone who, by all accounts, thought they were casually hooking up. Now, I know what you're thinking. What man on earth would put himself in that type of position? And as a man, let me be honest and say, we're weak. So almost any. But Diane had a plan. She told her public defender, people won't think I could shoot my kids if I'm pregnant again. So it wasn't about life. It was about optics, as usual. She wasn't trying to move on. She was trying to rewrite the narrative, to play the role of the expectant mother, the victim, the misunderstood. In that courtroom, it was her stage. When the trial began in May of 1984, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, sketch artists, families of the victims, and Christy, now 9 years old, was called to testify. It's May 1984. A little girl walks into the Lane County courtroom in Oregon. She's wearing a simple dress. Her shoes make the softest squeak against the floor as she steps up to the witness stand. This is Christy Downs. She's 9 years old, and she's about to do the unthinkable. The courtroom is silent. You can feel it. That kind of silence that only happens when 100 people are all holding their breath at the same time. Christy looks out at the rows of strangers and then at her mother, sitting just feet away. Diane is wearing a pink blouse, her hands folded neatly in her lap, expression unreadable. She doesn't wave. She doesn't cry. She just watches. Christy's voice is quiet, shaky. She doesn't make eye contact with Diane. She just keeps her hands in her lap. When the prosecutor begins asking questions, Christy answers with a soft yes or no responses. Her words are slow, measured, but her eyes say everything. She's afraid, not of the courtroom, not strangers. She's afraid of her mother. The prosecutor says, Christy, do you remember the night when you and your brother and sister were hurt? A pause. Christy nods. The prosecutor asks, can you tell the court who hurt you? The silence stretches. You can hear the faint clicking of someone's pen, the creak of an old bench shifting, the breath of a man in the front row held for too long, then exhaled in a shudder. Christy looks down. She swallows hard, and then, almost a whisper, my mom. Gasp. A few sobs. Reporters scribble furiously. Someone coughs into a sleeve. The judge clears his throat. Diane? Diane smiles, shakes her head like a teacher correcting a child who got the answer wrong. Not angry, not tearful, dismissive, as if this were just another inconvenience, another version of the story she didn't agree with. Christy is dismissed gently. She She's walked off the stand by a bailiff with a hand lightly on her shoulder. The prosecutor's hands rest on her neck as they pass her mother. She doesn't look at her, not once. That moment broke the case wide open, and it broke something in the public too. Because no one, not even the people who wanted to believe Diane was innocent, could look at that little girl and say she was lying. She'd been there. She remembered the flash, the pain, the sound, the silence, and the face of the woman who pulled the trigger. The prosecution's case was airtight. The ballistics matched the .22 handgun Diane once owned. Gunshot residue was found on the driver's door. Diane's timeline made no sense. Her behavior was erratic, performative, inappropriate. Her own diary revealed a woman obsessed with a man who wanted her, but not her children. And then there were the things she said, not in court, not on the stand, but to friends, to co-workers in passing. One remembered her saying, "It's not like I killed them. They're still alive, aren't they?" And another testified that Diane had once looked at a picture of her kids and said, "Three's a crowd." After 5 weeks of testimony and just 36 hours of deliberation, I'm surprised it took that long, folks, the jury came back with the verdict: guilty on all accounts. On June 17th, 1984, Diane Downs was sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. The judge made it clear she would never walk free again unless a parole board believed she'd changed. And Diane, she didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She didn't even blink. She walked out of the courtroom the same way she walked in, with a carefully practiced smile. She was sent to the Oregon Women's Correctional Center in Salem, but she didn't disappear, not even close. While incarcerated, Diane gave interviews, lots of them. She went on national television. She told reporters the real killer was still out there. She described the police investigation as a smear campaign. She said Christie had been coached to lie. She said the media wanted a villain, and she just fit the bill. "They've made me into a monster," she told one interviewer. "But I'm just a mother who's been misunderstood." But no one bought it anymore. The public had seen the performance. They seen the tape. They heard the testimony. And more than anything, they'd seen Christie. As of March 2025, Diane Downs is still behind bars, still waiting, still believing that someday someone will listen to her side again. But here's the thing about Diane. She didn't just try to kill her children. She tried to rewrite reality, tried to play the victim, tried to play the hero, tried to walk out of the court with clean hands and a new story. But truth doesn't work like that. And when the lights faded, when the camera stopped rolling, when the headlines moved on, she was still exactly where she belonged, behind bars. Not because she was a bad mother, but because she never wanted to be one at all. And even now, decades later, after the bullets, the lies, the trial, and the silence from her children, she still thinks she's the main character. Now it's your turn to speak. What do you think Diane really wanted that night on Old Mohawk Road? Was it love? Control? A fantasy life that finally broke through? And what do you make of a mother who could do something like this, then smile for the cameras? DM me for your thoughts. Message me. Let's talk about it. You're not just listening to the Murders Podcast. You're my co-host. Sources for this episode include Small Sacrifices by Ann Rule, court transcripts, State of Oregon versus Diane Downs, 1984, parole hearing transcripts, 2008, 2010, 2021, the Diane Downs case, 2020 interviews with Fred Hughey and Christy Downs, CNN and the Register Guard archival reporting, Diane Downs interviews from prison 1988 through 2010, and Rebecca Babcock Speaks Out, the Oprah Winfrey Network own. Murders Podcast is written and hosted by Sidney Smith. Music editing and production by Laugh Local Studios. This is a Laugh Local Network production. New episodes released weekly.